Okay, well, maybe I'll go ahead and get started. If people join us late, that'll be okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our program on What Do You Know About Waste? My name is Peggy Apthorpe, and I am currently working part-time as an AmeriCorps with Conservation Nebraska's Common Ground program. Conservation Nebraska is a statewide nonprofit that is dedicated to keeping our natural resources healthy. And one of the main ways we do that is by hosting public education programs like the one that we are doing this evening. A few housekeeping items before I introduce our speaker. You will be muted and your camera is off. If you want to put your questions or comments in the chat or Q&A boxes, we will address them at the end of the program. And it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Willa DiCostanzo. I have only had the opportunity to meet with Willa in person one time, but I could tell that she was a very knowledgeable, passionate, and dedicated person. Willa is a graduate of the University of Nebraska. Her degree is in environmental studies and English. She is currently the Waste Diversion Coordinator for the city of Lincoln. She has worked for the city for almost 10 years. One of her jobs was Environmental Educator with Keep Lincoln and Lancaster County Beautiful. She also worked with the Toxic Reduction Program. She's also served on a number of community committees. She's the treasurer of Earth Day and also a member of the Recycling Council. So we have an annual Earth Day in Lincoln, which many of you probably know about, but Willa has been involved with that for quite a while. So it's really my pleasure to turn the program over to her. And we appreciate all of you being here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. As Peggy said, my name is Willa DiCostanzo. I really appreciate Conservation Nebraska for letting me come talk to you all today, and I appreciate all of you for tuning in. When I get asked to do a presentation, a lot of times we get asked to do reduce, reuse, and recycle. And although all of those things are important, and I promise we'll get to those as we move through this discussion, what I really want to talk about is the much larger, broader topic about waste and the complex system that is waste. All of our day-to-day activities generally produce some waste. So it's important we start there and look at the system of waste compared to just the smaller pieces that help us reduce or minimize the amount of waste that we as humans produce. So I want to start with a quote. As a nature enthusiast myself, and I'm also working in the world of waste management, I have always enjoyed this quote by Dr. Kathleen Allen. Waste in nature is never wasted. It's used up through the process of decomposition within our ecosystem. So you think about the byproducts that waste produces for energy or food, ended up being soil enhancements and shelter for these microorganisms. Well, as humans, it seems at times that we have a disconnect from nature. And we also seem to then have a disconnect from waste that we produce also. And maybe these are co-correlated. We don't see or know what happens to the waste that we produce each day. Or maybe if we have learned it in the past or in school by chance, maybe we've forgotten it. I know I talked to many other people from generations ago that remember going out to the landfill or in those days, a lot of times a dump with their father or family member to get rid of their material. And so unless you've had this interaction of what happens to your waste, you don't realize what happens with everything that we consume and throw away each day. And that's really what I want us to go through. That's the journey that I want to take you on as we talk about the much larger system of waste and what that means to us as individuals on a day-to-day basis, and what's going to happen to this much larger system of waste as we look about it across the United States and across the world to some extent. But really locally, how we're going to make an impact on that. And then lastly, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the projects that we've implemented just recently to make steps towards that reduction of waste. So to start out, we're going to go down the path of consumption. And if you've all been paying attention to the news, just a few weeks ago, we heard that we have 8 billion humans on this planet. That's a lot of people. And thanks to elementary science school, we know that people, humans, like all living things, need a few basic items to survive: food, water, air, space, and shelter. Well, of all of those things, we as humans seem to be wanting more. We consume more. We need more things that are outside of that scope. And let's face it, we've probably all been trapped in this circular path of consumption. It's only $1, let's get it. Or I need this because they have it. Or this would be a really nice gift for X, Y, and Z. I'll just buy it for them. If they don't like it, they can return it. But do we really need all of these things? I mean, the media and advertisers tell us that we do. And nowadays, it's really so easy to just hop on your phone, click shop for something, and then have it delivered to your doorstep. And if you don't want it, then they'll just return it. But depending upon the company that you're returning it to, it may not go back on the shelf like you would imagine for somebody else to purchase. It may just get thrown away. These consumption impulses that we are all at fault for doing are really difficult to divert from. And a person really has to show some significant willpower to part from the societal norm of consumption. And Americans have been dreaming about this since after World War II ended. And we see the rise of things like Tupperware, more plastics, more consumption, more American dreaming. But nowhere in that picture of consumption have we talked about what happens to them after we're done using them. The stats that you see on the screen here are talking about the waste that we produce each day. So these are from the EPA, and it tells us that Americans produce about 5.5 pounds of waste per day. And in the past 50 years, humans have consumed more resources than in all previous history. So we need to think about waste. We need to move that higher up in our perspective. So it's not the end of the day after we're done using something. We need to move it to the beginning, when we're shopping, when we're consuming, when we need that item. What are we going to do with it afterwards? The picture that you see here is not stock footage. It was actually taken from a waste characterization study that we just did recently out at the Bluff Road Solid Waste Management Facility. And even in this picture, which is why I included it, you can see the resources that exist: aluminum cans, paper, fiber, clothing, all of these items that have now gone to the landfill because we've consumed and we've thrown away. And that has been the pattern. Consumption has been this linear trend. It leads you to see how you could get to that 5.5 pounds per person statistic that I had on the prior page. I'm sure this isn't every single person that has 5.5 pounds of waste, but if you look at it holistically, how much garbage we throw away, put into landfills, and you calculate that by the number of Americans, yeah, you start to see that number add up. And I know that this image doesn't necessarily have in there the reducing, reusing, recycling, and composting aspect of the system, but we have very much been in this take, make, waste pattern. We take our resources, we extract them, we use some of those resources into something new, then we use them at home or we use them for an item, and then eventually they are thrown away. Some of the items can surely be recycled, but the system itself has not been thinking in more of a circular pattern compared to what we are moving towards. So I would challenge each of you on the call just to take a look at your trash that you produce. Just in a week period of time, grab a pencil and a sheet of paper, and I want you to write down every single item that you throw away. And then I want everyone in your house to do that. And I want you to take it with you when you go out to eat, or when you stop for an item, or you go shopping and you throw something away. Notate that throughout the week. And when you're done, I think you'll be surprised by the eye-opening experience that you see of how much waste really does get produced by each of us. So I want to pause here for a moment and talk about, is it really waste? Or are we just not recovering the resources that we've used? We have extracted them from the ground, we've made them into something new, but these resources should be recovered. It's like that old idiom of one person's trash is another man's treasure. Well, that is a very real fact. And it's time that we move waste up in our purview and hierarchy to better understand and reframe what waste really is. It's not waste, it's resources that need to be recovered. There is more circularity that needs to take place compared to that take, make, use, dispose model. We need to look at this system in a more well-rounded, holistic fashion. The slide that you see here is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and they are doing a lot of work to try and make this systematic change when it comes to the production of materials, the packaging, what we do in order to repair them instead of just throw them away. We have a system in place to minimize what the waste is that we're disposing of. And that is just truly the waste. We've utilized this material over and over and over again. If we remember the initial quote from the first slide about nature, and in nature, waste is not wasted. Well, humans need to do that too, and we are starting to see that shift. It's really all about how it's being framed. And I want you to take a step back into history and remember the headlines a few years ago, even last year. There is a buckle in the supply chain. We need to get more items, but we can't get the shipping containers off. How are we going to have a holiday? All of these items started to get individuals to reframe what really is purchasing and consumption, and maybe I need to do it a different way. So these were headlines not only from last year, but even this year. Refurbished technology becoming something as a trend to buy compared to buying new. It's using that material that's refurbished and like new, instead of buying brand new and using those resources up from our environment. What about the one at the very top from Time? I tried buying only used holiday gifts, and it changed the way I think about shopping. How do we even buy nothing this holiday gift giving season? Now, I know this doesn't work for everybody, And maybe you can't do no gifts in your home this holiday season or any. But I do challenge you to purchase or re-gift one item this year, maybe even purchasing a used item instead of new. Even if you start small, it is a great place to change and normalize what other people are thinking around you. I try and carry that in conversations that I have. Oh, you like my shirt? Thank you. I got it at a secondhand store. It wasn't new, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be brand new to be something that we cherish or like. So now that we've talked about this bigger, broader topic of waste, I want to dive a little bit deeper on how we at our facility look at waste and waste diversion and what we're doing in Lincoln and Lancaster County to help reframe what we do in order to get those resources into a system that can be repaired or replaced. Our division of Lincoln Transportation Utilities is working towards the goal of resource recovery with two major plans, I'll say, and then also innovation and federal policies that are helping to drive that innovation also. In our bucket, we have our solid waste management plan, the Resilient Lincoln Climate Action Plan, and then also I'll just briefly go over some of the federal policies and innovation that are really leading towards this mindset change of resource recovery. The Solid Waste Management Plan started in 2012 and 2013 with a large group of community members that started to rethink how systems management could and should work in our community. We have worked to update that plan, with our most recent one being in 2020, which was a little bit more of a challenge than what we'd like with COVID going on. But we did have some additional recommendations from our committee that allows us to take priority and how to continue to push and elevate the concept of waste management in our community. The other path of Resilient Lincoln, the Climate Action Plan, which is on the City of Lincoln's website, has an entire section devoted to reducing waste. This section of reducing waste is in the forefront of deciding how and what steps we need to look at in order to make further innovative tasks to help reduce waste from going into our landfill. I'll explain a little bit more on some of these that we've started on when I get to talk about the projects that we've implemented so far or are working to implement in the next short time. Federally, there's a huge drive and a huge demand that's being put on all the different governmental entities across the United States. So the EPA just recently came out with a 50 by 30. So they want 50% of recycled materials to be within the recycling stream by 2030, because the recycling rate on a national level has been so low. They also have a lot of grant funding coming out just recently to help innovate and educate citizens across the United States to work towards understanding the system of circularity and how we need to use recycling as a pivotal piece associated to that. The EPA, as well as the USDA, have been pushing significantly about the food recovery hierarchy and wasted food that's occurring not only as organics going into the landfill here locally, but across the nation as a significant issue that we need to drive down. We cannot have wasted food. That's one of the forefronts that we're going to be working on in the next few years also. The US Plastics Pact has some significantly driven goals that are innovative and bringing the designers as well as the companies to the table to tell them the problems that we are facing all the way down to the consumer level and what they need to do to make it easier for consumers to be able to move that material into a circular fashion, if it's being recycled or if it's being reused in some way, shape, or form. They're changing the design standards or asking companies to change them so we can all be successful in moving towards a circular economy. Our educators have been true certified, so we can look at efficiencies within our own programs, as well as making sure the system of recycling and waste has been thoroughly thought through from the purchase of the product to the product getting into the right bin at the end of the day. Even more hyper-locally, I'd like to go into what our waste system looks like here in Lincoln and Lancaster County. There are multiple different aspects that we have associated to it. For our garbage collection, we have a private hauler system, and those private haulers are all listed on our website, which you'll have a little bit later in the presentation that you can go to. For compost and compost operation, here at the Bluff Road Solid Waste Management Facility, we make earth fuel, which is formerly known as Lin-Grow. That is compost that's made out of yard waste. So your leaves, your grass, and wood waste that we've ground. Prairie Land Dairy does take organics. So they take all of the material that comes from Lincoln Public Schools and other companies that pick up organic material here in Lincoln. Recycling, we have two big material recovery facilities, GreenQuest and First Star Fiber. We have a hazardous waste center. It's open Wednesdays, every Wednesday, and then the third Saturday of each month, Lincoln's Hazardous Waste Center. And then we also have a numerous amount of secondhand stores, also can be found on our website. I'll go into in just a little bit, but we also have reuse stores like Habitat for Humanity, which is a big facility that has many different options available that you can purchase, including furniture items, instead of just buying new. If you live in Lincoln and Lancaster County, we are unique still that we have our own landfill. So the Bluff Road landfill doesn't allow any other material into it except for material that is coming from Lincoln and Lancaster County. And I wanted to show you a brief video of what happens to the waste once it gets to the Bluff Road landfill. So what you're looking at is Highway 77 and Bluff Road, and we're panning over the top of the capped landfill. And each of these tiny little pieces that you see sticking out, those are wells that collect the gas or the methane that comes off of a landfill as garbage is put into it. Our landfill is open 365 days a year, and we have a variety of material that comes into it. It's been open since 1988. We have about 300 trucks per day, have an average of about 950 tons of waste that comes in. It's a lot of material. And landfills are an important aspect of what we need to put our waste in once we're done with that livelihood. So it doesn't go into our environment. It doesn't get just buried into the ground. A landfill has many different regulatory aspects that keep the groundwater and the air safe. So all of the vehicles, once they go past our scale house and get weighed in, will go to the active face of the landfill, which is what we're panning over now. And here at the active face of the landfill, we have compactors and dozers that will make sure that material gets secured into the ground. We also make sure that we cover up this landfill at night to prevent fires. You can see the birds flying over, but to prevent the birds from getting into the waste, it also prevents litter from blowing, smell, and is part of our regulatory compliance that we have to have for it. Overall, when you put your waste in the trash can and your garbage collector comes to pick it up, this is where it will end up, at the landfill. Panning around to the back of the landfill now, we are coming down our western slope. And I wanted to show this perspective of the landfill because it shows you what happens after we get the material in the ground. As I stated earlier in the video, we have wells that are sticking up that collect our landfill gas. Well, we also have a landfill gas collection system. So imagine having a big vacuum that's going through the landfill and it's sucking all of that gas into a building to be cleaned and scrubbed. And then it's fired and burned into energy. And that is what happens here at this building that you're seeing. There is landfill gas that gets cleaned and then sent over currently to the LES station to be able to be fired by generators and put into the electrical grid. Now, just because we start to think about diverting waste from the landfill doesn't mean that all of these aspects are not an important piece to make sure the waste that we do produce is sound and safe in a specific contained area. But it is important that we think about the footprint of what we do and how we do it each day, so it doesn't have to end up here at its very end spot, which is the burial and non-recoverable place for that waste to go. If you don't live in Lancaster County, the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy has a map of all of the different disposal locations across the state. So if you're in that boundary of Lancaster County, your waste comes to the Bluff Road Management Facility. But if not, and you live outside of our county, I wanted to include this because I wanted you to think about how far your waste will have to travel in order to get buried into the landfill. So some of these regions in southeast Nebraska may have to go several miles, maybe even hundreds of miles, to get to its final resting place and destination. So not only do we have carbon emissions from the very beginning of purchasing that product, we have it to get to the very end spot where it's going to be buried instead of turned into something else. Now at the Bluff Road composting facility, this is also at the same 6001 Bluff Road. And many people in Lincoln and Lancaster counties subscribe to yard waste collection. So I wanted to highlight what happens here at our facility with compost. What you're seeing are large windrows. So this is our essential recipe that we turn into earth fuel compost. And this compost is really important because we're starting to talk more about and rebrand and discuss with the community of the importance of compost. Compost is extremely important for soil health, and we all need soil to be able to live. So as a highlight, this is just what happens to that yard waste when it comes into our facility. It's turned into windrows, and then it's made into earth fuel compost. We also have this at no charge at the North 48th Street Transfer Station, generally when it's available throughout the spring, summer, and fall. And this is something that you can go into the North 48th Street Transfer Station and tell them you want the earth fuel compost, and then you're able to load it up and take it home and place it in your gardens. Now, I did want to talk about recycling because obviously recycling is an important part when we look at circularity or getting those materials back into the system of into the system of reuse, excuse me. So a lot of people don't know what happens to their recycling after it goes into that blue bin. And you'll hear in this industry a term called a MRF a lot. Well, a MRF is a material recovery facility. And as I said earlier, we have two of them. We have GreenQuest And then we also have First Star Fiber, which are two of the large material recovery facilities in our community. And here you can see in this image that's rotating how people actually have to touch and sort manually the first round of recycling as it comes in. After these items have been sorted by hand to take out some of the contamination, it will continue on down the path and then have mechanical sorting that goes into it. And then those items will eventually all be baled and sent to a mill, and that's how it starts that process of getting made into something new once again. Recycling has some facts and some myths associated to it. So I wanted to highlight just a few of those while we're still on that topic. Now, I know everybody can read, but I wanted to highlight a few of the ones that I've learned as I've been in this role and toured the facilities, because I think they are extremely important for people to understand. So the first thing is not everything can go into that blue bin. Many items get caught or tangled into the system of recycling. And so you want to make sure that you're not wish cycling. You really know what goes into that blue bin. A couple of the other questions that we get many times is if you have curbside recycling, or even if you use one of the recycling sites, you don't have to break down those cardboard boxes. Well, at the material recovery facilities, it's really important that you do break those down, because the flatness of the box helps that material get sorted correctly as it's going through that large system of sorting items to go into the right bin. If it's not flattened, it can look like it's a 3D object instead of a 2D and go into a different path, which then can contaminate or hinder the recycling system. Recycling is really important. It does get made into something new, and doing the act of recycling reduces greenhouse gas emissions from pulling or extracting new materials. Aluminum, for example, can be made into a new aluminum can over and over and over again. One of the falses that I had on there was that recycling is hard. And a lot of people may have questions about it. And I want to make sure the community knows that there are resources out there to help you discover what can and can't be recycled. So that way you don't go into that wish cycling mode and just put everything into the bin. So our website is lincoln.ne.gov/recycle. And we have a new app that we put on called What Bin Does It Go In? And this search tool will not only help you with questions that you have about recycling, but it'll give you suggestions on where you can reduce and reuse, or where you can donate the material to a place that would accept it. It'll also help you discover what can go to the Hazardous Waste Center. And if you have a question about something that you can't find on there, we always have our phone number available that people are always welcome to reach out and talk to us. If you don't see the item on there that you're searching for, you can even suggest it. So we review it and then enter it into this database. So it's continually evolving and changing. So you, as a community member, can get assistance immediately about knowing what you can do with those materials. It makes the system of recycling safer, and it also helps to divert that material from going directly into your trash can and could give it another life. Now, I wanted to talk just briefly about some of the programs within the realm of waste diversion that we've been completing just over the last few years. So the projects that we've been implementing are pretty exciting. And so just to give you a highlight about some of them, we just completed waste audits on over 50 city buildings. And what that's allowed us to do is create a benchmark to better understand how much recycling we're doing throughout the city buildings and give our employees a challenge that will push them to get to some of the resilient Lincoln strategies. For example, one of the resilient Lincoln strategies is to have 80% of the readily recyclable material diverted by 2040. So we now have a baseline, and our employees are going to have a baseline in order to leverage them further to choose and understand the right bin to put their item in. And we're helping to further that discussion by labeling each of the recycling and trash containers with the appropriate signage, and that's going to be universal throughout the city of Lincoln. That will help everybody, no matter what building you go into, if you're a citizen or if you're actually an employee, to be able to see where your recyclable materials should go. This is a similar design, the Recycle Across America signage that we're using, that LPS uses throughout their school system. And it's also what we have on all of the bins that are at our recyclables collection sites. So again, the look and feel of the signs, so you understand how to recycle, will be streamlined and everybody will get that same message. Another project that we just got done doing is completing a waste characterization study. And that's not only in our solid waste management plan, but it's also in the Resilient Lincoln plan. A waste characterization study is truly just going through sections of waste in a statistically significant pattern. So what you're able to do is then get a good analysis of what waste you have coming into the landfill, and you have a large target of what you need to divert. So in the last few waste characterization studies, we've seen that organics, so your material that could be readily diverted, is high. And so that's how we know that's going to be one of our focus points to go forward. We didn't only do the landfill, we did the recycling MRF, and we also did our transfer station, and we did the community recyclables collection site, so we could better understand how to educate the citizens about what should and shouldn't go into that recycling bin. Another project, or a few other projects that we have in the pipeline, and ways that we're continuing to get this education out to the community, include video production that we're going to be shooting and eventually releasing onto our website to show you the process of what happens at these recycling facilities. We want to show you what happens with the process of the waste and how it travels to get to our site at the Bluff Road Solid Waste Management Facility. We've just rebranded our compost to Earth Fuel to really drive home that composting is extremely important, and using compost as an amendment to your soil not only helps your soil get more organic matter, but it helps reduce the amount and demand of synthetic fertilizer that you need to place on your yard to get that really green grass. Helps with water retention. There are so many aspects of compost that we needed to bring to life once again. We have articles and booths that we've been trying to do throughout the year to make sure that we are public and available to answer questions about this massive system of waste, so that way citizens can have that be first and foremost in their eyes and have somebody readily available to answer questions that they may have. We're excited to continue pushing forward, and we're excited to make our community better and more circular as we move into the next years ahead of us. But we want everybody to be on that same page, and we want to be able to be a good, viable resource for anybody that has questions along the process. And with that, I will leave you with my contact information and answer any questions that may come up. I just wanted to leave you with this last image, which is the solid waste management hierarchy. So this not only is the hierarchy that we have in our documents, but it's what the EPA has also. So you're moving through that system of what is the most preferred. And you can see reduce is one of the top ones. And as a reminder that reducing, reusing, and recycling is still very, very important in this system of waste and waste diversion. And thank you all.
Okay, if you all, we will respond to questions here in a minute, but if you wouldn't mind taking a minute or two to complete the post-event survey, this is something that we need for our funding and for planning purposes. So if the participants would go ahead and do that, we would really appreciate it. And there's Willa. Okay, this is my first time being a Zoom host. So. Oh, by the way, I thank Sarah McLean, who is our Zoom, actually running the tech part of this. Okay, the one question is, what is the life expectancy of the landfill?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We get that a lot. I will say to some extent it's all relative. So if we have an extreme event, so think about extreme flooding issues that may occur or a tornado that happens in our community. When you have extreme situations, they generally produce more waste and more material that has to get buried somewhere or moved to someplace for safe burial. So in an ideal world, when we live in a non-extreme situation, you could be looking anywhere from 2030, let's say, is when the end of the life expectancy of the landfill that you saw. But it is not a hard and fast number because there are so many variables that change how the landfill gets buried, or depending upon what construction or demolition would look like in our community, that has a huge impact or factor associated to that also.
Okay, thank you. What project excites you the most and why?
That's a great question too. I think all of them excite me because this is the world that I live in and I actually work out at the landfill. And so the more that we work to educate our community to move materials to be diverted, that really is extremely important for the system of waste that we get to see and receive every day. But I think some of the biggest ones that I'm very excited for as we move into 2023 and 2024 is really the push to educate our community on organic waste that occurs in our homes or that can occur for other reasons in restaurants and other instances. We have a lot of good established connections already in our community with food banks and FoodNet, but having that reflection and tips about what you can do in your own home with food waste is something that we're really getting geared up for and excited for now that we have our belt of waste audits underneath us. That's going to be our big push next.
Okay, are paper drink cartons recyclable? Like milk, I'm assuming that's milk cartons and juice cartons.
Yep. So it depends upon whom your collector would be. First Star Fiber does have the technology in order to accept those cartons. So if you have curbside collection at home, I would recommend that you call your recycling collector and ask them where your recyclables end up. Is it going to GreenQuest? Is it going to First Star Fiber? And that will give you that answer. You're always welcome to call us and we can help you navigate that too.
Okay, thank you. Please talk about plastic recycling. I have heard that very little of the plastic we put in recycle bins actually gets recycled.
Yeah, plastics, plastics are in abundance, right? We see that we have a lot of plastics. I just shared with a phone call earlier about a carpet company that I received a video from one of our material recovery facilities, and they take your #1 plastic bottles and they actually go through the process and how they collect so many bottles in order to make carpet and carpeting. It's called Mohawk carpet, and they take a lot of the plastics that we have around here and get turned into something new. There's another company in town called Central States Reprocessing, and they actually are a plastic post-consumer resin facility. So they'll take our plastics and they'll chip it into tiny little pieces, and then they sell it back on the market in order to be sold and made into something new once again. So plastics as a whole do have a large number of material that is going into that stream, but at times it's also not enough if the demand of the industry is to use more post-consumer resin, and people don't put that plastic in there, then there's not enough material in order to make it into something brand new. There was a recent Greenpeace article that just came out, and they had some skewed numbers, I would say, if you're looking at the system holistically, about what happens to plastic and plastic recycling. There has been some challenges if you're looking at how the material recovery facilities send it off to market, particularly on the coastal regions, because they were offshoring a lot of the material. But our material recovery facilities have a lot of great connections in the Midwest that have allowed a lot of that product to get turned into something new. And when you look at the innovation of the hefty energy bag, First Star Fiber is actually taking those plastics, or the plastics that may not be able to be recycled, so they're kind of your scrap plastics, and they're actually making that into decking, not a composite board, but it's a all plastic decking that they're making out of it.
Okay, let's see here. Just a minute off. Okay, Mary has a question. I recycle plastic bags at Hy-Vee. I recently read that the produce bags grocery stores provide clog up the recycling or processing machinery. Is this true?
So if you're putting them in the grocery or retail stores where they have the big bins at the very front, that's not clogging up the system. So your retail stores like Hy-Vee will take all of that material and they'll ship it back to their warehouse, and then it's picked up by a composite lumber company such as Trex Lumber, and then they melt it down, they mix it with sawdust, and then they actually make like a composite lumber out of it. Now, if you're putting your recyclables in a bag and you're putting it into your blue recycling cart or one of the recyclable collection sites, that causes issues. Those really do get caught up in the machines and get caught up in the cogs of those machines, similar to what you saw on my screen that was flipping over and over again. When those bags get caught up too thick, they actually have to stop all of the machinery and cut out the bags by hand. So it's extremely dangerous on top of it. So we recommend that none of that plastic film or bagging your recyclables, none of that gets put into the blue cart or the recycling bins at our facilities around town.
Okay. Thank you for being patient. How much is it to sign up for composting service?
Because we're a private hauler system, I don't have that information, but Waste to Energy Lincoln is a part of UREV Refuse. They'll be able to answer that question for you.
Okay, could you or someone in your department come to do a presentation at a church?
Yes, absolutely. You can feel free to email me or call our number, and happy to help set that up.
Yeah, or if someone would want to email me, I could get them in touch with you too. Okay. Drink containers from fast food places, can these be recycled, or does the special sealant preclude them from recycling?
The last I heard was that they could go into the bin. I can help answer that if you want to give us a call. It really depends upon, so you saw the big facility and how they have to source separate it all. Well, once those materials are baled, they get sent to a mill. And depending upon what the contract is with that mill, some of them are a little bit more specific than others. So it kind of depends upon the company that you land on, but we can help you navigate and answer that. You are absolutely always welcome to email us or give us a phone call, and we can get that stamped answer for you.
Okay, what recyclable is in the biggest demand?
Well, recycling in general is a commodities market. So just like corn and wheat and soybeans, there is a constant ebb and flow when it comes to the demand of recyclables. I think holistically, you could say all of them, when it comes to your fibers and when it comes to plastics and aluminum, all have a place to go. They are always wanted because at some point in time, a company or a manufacturing entity is going to say, hey, we need more of post-consumer, whatever, plastic, resin, aluminum. We need to be able to have those readily available. And that's why we continue to push to recycle. So that way, when that demand rises, then it's there and available.
Okay, some packaging seems excessive or impossible to open safely. For example, clamshell packages. Do sellers listen to any feedback we could offer to hopefully improve these things?
I would say always. As a consumer, I generally always call their helpline, or if I have a concern, I'll at least send an email about it. A lot of those trends are starting to get heard more and more when it comes to that circular economy. And that's part of what that Ellen MacArthur Foundation and many other companies are starting to take a look at. Do we really need to have materials packaged this way? And if we don't, then what's the smart packaging that we have? I know even the companies around here that are material recovery facilities, they work with some manufacturers to better understand if their product design can be recycled or if it needs to be redesigned in order for it to be recycled. As companies are getting more and more push for sustainability goals, that is something that they're going to have to look at also. So it never hurts to use your voice, never.
Okay, metal caps to glass bottles, are they recyclable? I see they have a seal on them. Does that have to be removed before recycling? And since they're so small, how can you ensure they actually get recycled?
Yeah, anytime you're doing like a soda bottle or a Coke bottle or adult beverage bottle, all of those are the metal with that plastic inside. My recommendation is you put them in a steel or a tin can that you may have, and then just pinch the top closed. So that way, when you recycle it, you're able to keep those in there, and that metal does get recycled at that point in time. If you just have them loose in the bin, they're so small that they will get dispersed throughout the recycling process. But if you have them, pinched into that aluminum can, there's more likelihood that they'll make it to the dump.
Okay, Michael has a tip, which is to bring your own mesh bags to the store and don't use the plastic produce bags. It's a good tip.
A good tip.
And the last question here is, why can't glass be recycled from curbside pickup?
That's a good question. And thank you for bringing that up. It was in my true and false thing. So glass, when it gets picked up, will go into the big compactor truck. So the second that it goes in there and they are trying and pack that recyclable materials in there so they can get as much in as they can, that glass breaks, and it breaks into small, tiny shards. And from that picture that I had in my presentation of employees that are constantly checking over the system of waste that they have, if you have those tiny pieces of glass that are falling onto this belt that you see here, they are dealing with glass shards not only for the danger of their employees, but the glass acts like sandpaper, and it ruins the belts much faster on these recycling facilities. And really, by the time that it gets to this point, you don't get a lot of the glass in order to be recycled. So at our recycling sites around town, there is glass bins available. And what happens to those? They are all in the same container. They're all dumped into one bunker that is specifically for glass. And then all of that glass gets loaded down to Ripple Glass, which is in Kansas, and they use it at that facility. So instead of commingling it with paper and endangering individuals within that process and wearing down machinery faster, we just recommend that it gets its own unit and is made into recovery that way.
Okay, well, I think that is the last question. Willa, we can't thank you enough for this very informative presentation, and the pictures and videos really added a lot to it. I want to also thank everyone for coming. This has been recorded, so if you know of anybody who wanted to attend but was unable to, it will be on the Conservation Nebraska website. And also on the website, you will find information about upcoming events. And thanks again for coming. And Willa, you did a great job. Yeah. I love your videos. I've never really seen the recycling thing. So
we'll have more, Peggy. As soon as we get more, I'll let you know.
Okay, yeah, good. I think it would be good to have your food waste, something on food waste would be interesting.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.